He was a husband, a father, a successful businessman.
He had built a beautiful life for himself and his family on Tucson's west side, where his home was his castle.
That is until that castle became the backdrop for a brutal betrayal and murder. 9 Your Side's Maggie Vespa begins our murder mystery series with the case, Who Killed Kurt Imel?
It is the epitome of picturesque, rolling hills, roaming wildlife, peace, tranquility, and one would assume, security. And in the middle of all this beauty, there is one neighborhood, one house that carries with it one family's ugly, tragic tale.
911, what are you reporting?
I just heard yelling in my front yard. My husband was out there. I'm afraid to open any doors.
His name was Kurt Imel, a Sierra Vista native turned Walmart exec.
Everyone that we spoke to about Kurt, they spoke nothing but, very highly of him.
It was July 28th, 1999, a Wednesday, around 9 p.m. Imel, his wife Teresa, and their 3 youngest kids had just returned from dinner. Imel stood in front of his West Side home. He was alone, or so he thought. Suddenly, an attacker runs at Imel, blinds him with pool acid, stabs him, and brutally finishes him off with a brick.
He had significant trauma to his face, to his head.
The crime left the community shaken.
It's scary for me and my son and my family to think someone like that, someone can come and kill you in your own house.
And it led detectives down a dark path. Then homicide detective Gary Anderson.
There was a significant amount of blood in this trail. Drag marks, if you will.
A trail left when the killer dragged Imel's body down the long gravel drive toward his own car. When detectives arrived, they found it gone and the family cowering inside, as they had through the whole vicious attack.
I don't know what's going on. My dog is barking, and I'm afraid to open any doors to find out what's happening.
All that carnage, and yet no killer, no car, no witnesses. So in a murder that seems so personal but so random, where do you start?
A husband and father dead, brutally murdered while his family cowered in their rural West Side home. Still, detectives hope they had seen or heard something, anything that could help them figure out who killed Kurt Imel. We want to warn you, these details are graphic. Here again is 9 on Your Side's Maggie Vespa.
I mean, if you were to walk into that household, you would say they had a fairly good life.
But detectives were now learning that home housed a family near its breaking point. Kurt Imel and his wife Teresa had separated. He lived in Phoenix, only returning to Tucson to visit their 3 youngest children. Breaks began during Detective Anderson's interview with Imel's 17-year-old stepdaughter, Tiffany, who had not yet been told of his death.
And asked her, how old is your mom? At first she wasn't sure, but she eventually said 34, maybe 35. And I said, okay, how about your dad? How old is he? And she says he was about 37 or 38.
Was, when referring to a man she should believe to be alive. Remember, that word had reared its telling head before in Teresa Imel's 911 call.
My husband was out there.
But wasn't enough. Enter break number 2, the result of a top-to-bottom search of the Imel home.
And we did find a broken knife outside the house, which matched a set of knives inside the house.
But all who had access to that knife had been inside during the attack, including Teresa, Tiffany, and Tiffany's boyfriend, Troy Bertling. But in his interview, it was Bertling who brought a new name to the suspect list.
He gave me the name Danny. He didn't know Danny's last name, but I wrote it down. And he said that Danny worked at a car wash, and he told me which one.
Danny was Danny Averett, a family friend. Detective Anderson brought him in for questioning and quickly noticed break number 3.
I noticed that his shoe soles were very similar to shoe impressions that were found in blood at the scene.
And by pointing out that one key piece, Detective Anderson says Danny Averett crumbled. He confessed to killing Imel, told him who put him up to it and why. It was a twisted plot devised by Teresa, Tiffany, Troy, and Danny during days-long meth binges. The reason? Kurt knew of the drug use and was working for custody of the younger children. Danny was hired to carry out the execution and get rid of Kurt Imel's car, which was found miles away, torched. His compensation, $500. It is a motive, a murder, that now Lieutenant Anderson says it sticks with him to this day.
He was led there. This was a setup. He was led to the slaughterhouse, and the slaughterhouse was his house.
Teresa and Tiffany Imel are behind bars tonight, as are Troy Bertling and Danny Averett. The three youngest Imel children are being cared for by loved ones.